Hi, Kenny here, and I want to make a quick um, video on talking about mirrorless cameras and why I think, and these are some of the things you might want to consider if you're considering a camera and you don't know whether or not you want to go optical or mirrorless. So, what I've got with me on the shelves, and this is kind of my collection here, are some Nikon cameras. I've got a Nikon Z6, which I've been using since it's about 6, 7 years old. This is my most recent DSLR purchase, I guess. No, actually not. The second most recent. It's a Nikon D780. My third camera here is a Nikon D7500. So for the most part of my photographic career, I've been using optical viewfinder DSLRs, and I got into using the Nikon Z6 6 years ago for mirrorless. And one of the more interesting, funny stories, and I keep telling this when it comes to mirrorless cameras, is I remember when I first got my Z6 and shot my first couple of weddings where I worked, 8+ hours behind the lens. And I ended up with the eye spasm, just had a really bad twitch in my eyes for 3 or 4 days that just didn't go away. And I wasn't sure why. And I think over time, I've kind of deduced it to the fact that when you're shooting long hours behind a mirrorless camera, my eyes just weren't used to that constant change in exposure levels in the viewfinder itself. And I never found that to be the case with my DSLRs. Okay. So, a couple things you might think about, you might want to consider when you're thinking between DSLR and mirrorless, is that one of the things is that, and this is the thing I think a lot of people fail to mention when they do these camera reviews is, and when you're looking at camera systems, is how much do you want to prioritize optical real-time information? And let me word it in a different way. How much do you want to prioritize seeing the possibilities of your capture versus seeing the final result? Because I think essentially when you are shooting for the most part with a mirrorless camera, a lot of times you're looking at the final result, whether, it's the final exposure, the way the out of focus depth of field is working out for you in a particular image. And you're working on, and you're seeing a lot of that final result in a mirrorless camera. Pair it up to a DSLR, a traditional optical viewfinder, you are seeing that information in more real time. You're seeing a lot of possibilities, and even when it comes to framing things, because if you have an object in the foreground that is properly exposed and an object in the background that's overexposed in a mirrorless camera, you might not see those details in the background. So, and to give you like an extreme here, when you look at some of the Leica rangefinders, Leica M6, even in the current M digital series, it's a rangefinder-based autofocus. The rangefinder-based manual focusing system gives you way more optical information than that's required for you to compose a picture. So it really depends on your flavor, on what you want to prioritize. If you want to prioritize on, getting that raw information in your eyeballs, and I'm talking like going street shooting, having those informations in your viewfinder so you can make those adjustments in framing, and arranging those informations. A rangefinder is the extreme because it gives you all the details. Because if you're looking at the world even through an aperture of f2.8 through your viewfinder, you're still seeing the world at an aperture of f2.8. So some things aren't going to be in focus for you. Whereas a rangefinder, it allows your eye to basically wander throughout a frame, and you decide on what you want to take to create your image. And that kind of system is kind of the polar opposite of the mirrorless system. And I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, but this decision, I think, is what a lot of camera reviews and things you read online fail to kind of talk about, is that real-time visual information. So some of the cases where one of the reasons why I am pro DSLR for me is that it allows me to use the battery even longer than I need to. So if I'm taking 500-600 images, that battery in a DSLR works really well for me. Couple things. If I'm shooting even telephoto, I find, and you're shooting fast-moving objects, I really do prefer the optical viewfinder in a traditional DSLR. If I am shooting in a studio, and this is one of the tricky things, if you're shooting in a studio and you don't have that exposure because you're triggering flashes, the traditional DSLR works a lot better alongside a traditional analog strobe system. A lot of times, even with the Nikons and Sonys, you have to turn off that preview for you to even frame an image. And often at times when you're shooting in a studio and you have strobes set up to shoot, you're usually in a darker environment to allow that flash to kind of take over. So one of the advantages, just another one of the advantages to a traditional DSLR. The ability to in really, really low light, and I mean like next to no light. If you put a flash on your optical SLR, you can use a flash to fire the infrared beams to focus on subjects. Now, let's talk about the, I guess, advantages of mirrorless cameras. I believe one of them is that ability for you to preview that final image. So if you're looking for a product shot, you're looking at photographing things that don't move, and you have all the time to adjust and get that exposure right, it'll really streamline your workflow. So if you are doing commercial work, if you're doing work that allows you to get closer to that final image, and a lot of cameras have these styles that can apply real time to your image. You're seeing that final result near real time. So that's one of the advantages of a mirrorless camera. Why are companies now just making mostly mirrorless cameras? I suspect that it's partly due to people getting used to the idea of photographing with smartphones, therefore seeing that exposure and that result on a screen. They might have a preference to a mirrorless camera. And I think it has influence on why a lot of camera manufacturers now are moving strictly towards mirrorless cameras. I think the mechanisms in these mirrorless cameras are easier in that you don't have to have a separate autofocus system built into a traditional eye prism to focus optically. Everything is sensor based, so that kind of streamlines the manufacture and design process. Do I feel like mirrorless cameras are the way to go? Not necessarily, and that's the point I'm trying to drive home here, is that we live in a time where there are a lot of varieties out there. You can still pick up some older DSLR bodies. Currently, even a few currently made DSLR bodies that work very well. So I just want to kind of put this out there because I haven't made a photo-based video yet, and I kind of want to share my thoughts on mirrorless cameras and what some of the advantages of mirrorless versus optical cameras are. And one of the things I do want to drive home is the fact that they are very different in how you see that final result. And even just, how much do you want to see the world through a screen? I can't help nowadays. I can't help nowadays the thought of looking behind one of these cameras and using these cameras and knowing that I am just acquiring more screen time in my life bothers me a bit. I don't know why. Probably has to do with me just being constantly on screens. So the last thing I sometimes want to do is look through a camera and see another screen. So keep that in mind. If you are curious about mirrorless or DSLR cameras and you have any thoughts that you want to add to this discussion, please leave some comments. Thanks. Bye.